In this next video, we'll talk about loops, which is another form of control flow. We're going to use loops to repeat a block of code as many times as we want given a conditional. We've already seen functions, which are the set of code that we can execute at a later time somewhere else in our code, and conditionals, which represent logic given some input inside of our programs. The next thing we'll see is loops, which allow us to repeat a set of code over and over again. I created a new copy of my starter code to demonstrate my loop. I'm going to put the loop inside of the main function. And in this course, we're going to use the while loop syntax. There are many different syntaxes for loops in JavaScript, but the while loop is going to enable us to more clearly see the mechanics of how the loop runs and really be able to break things down. So a loop needs a couple of things. We need a variable that is the starting condition of the loop. And then inside the parentheses, we're going to evaluate a condition. And as long as this condition is true, then the loop will continue to run. And by run, I mean that all of the code between the curly braces inside the block is going to run. And we don't want the loop to run forever, so we're going to change the value of the counter variable so that eventually the condition between the parentheses becomes false. So counter is equal to or over 3, and the loop will stop running. So to demonstrate this, so I have all the pieces already. I have a starting condition. I have a conditional Boolean evaluation here, operation. I have a block of code that I want to run. Inside my block of code, I'm altering the counter variable so that the loop doesn't run forever. And the one line of code I'm actually going to run here is a console log. And we'll just print out the value of the counter. And then at the end, I'll print another message. Let's save this and see it in the browser. Now I'll click the submit button and let's see what happens. So I get some console logs. Let's break down how the code works. So I begin before outside of the loop, I'm creating this default value. Then I'm going to evaluate each time the loop runs. So the very first time, I'm already evaluating is counter less than 3. And so I already know that counter is 0, so that's true. And I go inside the loop between the curly braces, and I output my value here in the console log. And then I add 1 to the value of counter. So now counter is equal to 1. And that's the last line in the block. So I go back around. Then the next thing that happens is that I evaluate my condition. So the value of counter is 1, like I said. And so this condition is still true. Counter is still less than 3. And I come in here and I do my console log, and I get this line over here. And then I increment the value of counter by 1. And then I come back around again to evaluate the condition. The counter is now 2. The value of counter is now 2. So the condition is still true. I have my console log here. And then I add 1 to the value of counter. Now the value of counter is 3. And my loop ends, my block ends, I come back here and I evaluate my condition again. My condition is now false. So counter is not less than 3. The value counter is 3. And so now I exit out. So I don't run my block anymore. And then I just go to the next line. So line 12. So that's line 8 there. So I get my last console log, the end. And the value of counter is 3. Now that we've seen the basic mechanics of a loop, let's actually output something to the gray box. So I'm going to get rid of the console logs. And inside the loop, I'm going to create something that's going to be output. So I'm going to move my output value variable above the loop, and then I'm going to alter it inside the loop. And before I run this code, try to take a look at it and guess what you're going to see in the gray box when it runs. Now I'm going to hit the submit button. Now our loop represents the idea that we want to output hello 3 times. But that's just as if I wrote the 3 hellos directly in my output value. So how is a loop different? The main reason it's different is that we have a single integer number that controls the number of times the loop runs, or the number of times we're going to get hello. That's specifically this number right here. And so we can simply replace this with a dynamic value, with the value from the user, and we're going to run this as many times as the user has typed in. So let's do that now. And I'm going to put this back, and let's run this in the browser and see what happens. I'm going to input a number, and we should see that number of hellos in the gray box. The powerful thing about a loop is that it runs based on another piece of data. So if our program is also in charge of that piece of data, then we can be in charge of how many times the loop runs.